Today we're gonna make a gluten-free pie crust, and I'm gonna tell you what this recipe is not. It's not dense, it's not chewy, it's not dry or crumbly, and it is not hard to roll out. So full disclosure, this recipe came from America's Test Kitchen, How Can It Be Gluten-Free cookbook, but I have made it hundreds of times. In fact, I have so many tricks that are not in the original published recipe that I'm gonna teach you today, how to get a flaky crust, how to roll it out. I got it all here, so let's get started. So the first thing is the order of how to prep the ingredients. So you need 1 stick of butter, which is 113 grams. And what I do is I chop that into like 1/2-inch pieces and I put that in the freezer for about 10 minutes so it's really cold before we add it to the other ingredients. So do that first, mine's in my freezer. And then the next thing you wanna do is get your liquids together because that is also gonna go into the refrigerator so that gets cold before adding it in. So for the liquids, you need 1.5 tablespoons of sour cream, and the sour cream tenderizes the crust and it also helps build out that structure of the crust so it's not just all butter for the fat, but you have something else to coat the GF starches so that you don't get that gritty texture. Then 1.5 teaspoons of vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar. You can also use lemon juice or vodka, works too. That's also for tenderizing the crust. And then 2.5 tablespoons of ice water. So this is what I do. I put my ice water in a bigger thing and then I measure the 2.5 tablespoons in a smaller container, just so I also know that is nice and cold. Okay, and then that goes in. And then I'm just going to combine this together really quick. It doesn't have to be completely smooth, but just so you mix everything together. And then I'm going to put this mixture in the fridge. If you're intimidated by making pie crust and you have one of these things, then you're good to go. If you don't have one of these, you can still make the pie crust. You can use a mixing bowl, and this is just a pastry blender. It's like $5 or $6, but honestly, a fork works too. It's just to mix the butter into the flour. Or what I recently tried was my stand mixer. That works too, using the paddle attachment. So you have 3 options here. I'm gonna show you how I do it in the food processor. I'm using cup for cup gluten-free flour, which I highly recommend. I have tested this recipe with this flour. I've done King Arthur, which I feel like the dough's a little looser and stickier. The crumb is good, but I also find it a tad chewier. And then the other thing I tried was Bob's Red Mill, which it works really well to hold the crust together and for rolling it out, but I find the texture of the crust really dense and really chewy. Now, if you weren't eating all these crusts side by side, which is what I did when I tested all the flours, you probably wouldn't see that much of a difference. But honestly, if you can use cup for cup, I feel like it works the best. So you need 3/4 plus 2/3 cup of gluten-free flour, which is 194 grams. And 1.5 teaspoons of sugar and 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we're just going to combine this really quick. So if you were doing this in a bowl or a stand mixer, just kind of mix it up on low speed or with a fork. Okay, now here's our like very cold, partially frozen butter. I'm just gonna throw that in there. This is when you would use a pastry blender or a fork to kind of like mix that in. But this is what makes it so simple with a food processor. If you had a stand mixer, the paddle attachment works for this as well. Once you combine all that together, it should look like a dry, sandy mixture. And here's the magic of working with gluten-free flours. You don't have to worry about overworking the dough like if you were using wheat flour. So usually wheat flour pie crusts are a little trickier because you want to be very precise on the consistency of the dough, but these are a lot more forgivable. In fact, I'm just gonna throw in all the liquid now. For a wheat crust, you want to kind of do this gradually because you want the crust to just come together. But for a gluten pie crust, it's okay if the dough's a little wetter, so you don't have to worry about that as much. The mixture after you add the liquid should start to clump up and it should almost come together in like a ball. If it's still a little dry and sandy, then add more ice water to it. So it should be a nice wet consistency that clumps together. That's what you're looking for. Now just take out that dough and put a large piece of plastic wrap on your workspace, and we're just gonna transfer this over, and I'm going to shape this into like a big flat disc. Wrap that up, and then this is gonna go in the fridge for at least 1 hour, but I've done it up to overnight. Now, the America's Test Kitchen Cookbook says that it can go up to 2 days. I find that it dries it out if it's in the fridge that long, so I recommend just doing it overnight. If you need the dough later than that, then I would freeze this, set it in the fridge overnight, and then roll it out when you need it. Okay, so our dough's nice and cold. In fact, when you pull it out of the fridge, it's gonna be too cold. I recommend setting it out for about 15 minutes before you start rolling it, just so the dough moves around. You don't break a sweat. This thing, oh my gosh. If you're serious about making gluten-free dough, and why wouldn't you be? This is the best $20 you'll ever spend. It's a silicone rolling mat. You don't have to mess around with parchment paper or plastic wrap or wax paper, crinkling up or anything like that. You just plop your dough in here, roll it out. It doesn't stick to it. You don't have to add more flour to the dough, which I like because then you're gonna dry it out. And then it even has these handy little shapes on there so you know exactly how big to roll it depending on your pie plate. So this OXO makes this one. I love this thing. It's like the gift I give everyone that's getting into gluten-free baking. So we just put our dough right in the middle. I'm using this pie plate, which I also recommend use metal pie plates when you're baking gluten-free crust. I'll get to it more in a little bit, but it conducts the heat a lot better. It makes the bottom crust crispier, which is a problem that I always struggled with until I just exclusively started baking my pies in metal. I'm gonna put this over just to see how big I need to roll it. So this is going to about 10 inches. So I'm gonna do an overhang. So I'm gonna roll it out 1 inch more than that. That's what I'm shooting for on here. And just start rolling it out and rotating so it stays even. I press down hard in the middle and then I kind of like scooch it out to the side. So if you don't have one of these things, you can still make it. I would just use parchment paper. So you would use 2 pieces of parchment paper and put it between. Plastic wrap works too, although I find that it gets kind of in the dough a little too much and then crinkles it up. I'm gonna show you something real quick. If your dough is getting too warm and you can't lift this up anymore, I have just taken this whole thing, put it in the fridge, let it chill again, and then this will come off really easily. The other thing is, if you find your dough's a little like lopsided, if you have one side that's like sticking out more than the other, you can just kind of take it and put it where you need some dough so it's nice and round. Close it back up and then roll it again. It's really forgivable and easy to work with. So we're ready to put this in our pie plate. So I'm gonna unzip it, take this off, and like I said, if it's kind of sticking to it, just pop the whole thing in the fridge. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to put my pie plate over it right in the center, and then I'm just gonna kind of lift this whole thing up and flip it over. Once it's flipped over, you can kind of use your hand to press the crust down into the plate. If it cracks at all at this point, usually it would crack if this dough got a little too cold. It's fine, just press it all together with your fingers. It'll work out perfectly. Just do it kind of slowly so you don't tear it, but if you do end up tearing it, don't worry about it. Just press it all together. And then this could go in the dishwasher. I just kind of wash it by hand too. And then just take your crust, make sure it's nice and flat on the bottom and up the sides. And then we're ready for the fun part where we're going to shape the crust. So I measured my crust out pretty well. I don't have a ton of overhang, but if you had some edges that were really sticking out higher than the others, then I just take some kitchen scissors and kind of go around. Then you're just gonna take your edges and fold them over a little bit so they're nice and even. Now is the most fun part where you get to flute the edges. So you could just take a fork and kind of go around the edge. You could do nothing. I like to use my fingers and do it. So I use my thumb and then my forefinger and I just press my thumb forward, my forefinger back. Rotate, thumb forward, forefinger back. Before you bake it, always freeze it again first. Cold, cold, cold. We want everything cold. So put this back in the freezer for 15 minutes. You can cover it with a piece of plastic wrap, but if you're doing it 15 minutes, don't worry about it. It can also go in the freezer up to overnight at this point. Just make sure it's more well covered. I'm going to blind bake it, meaning I'm not going to put any filling in here, but if you were doing a filling, I would put this in the freezer and then mix up your filling. So while this is freezing, we're gonna preheat our oven to 375, and here is another hot tip. Put a metal baking pan in your oven while the oven is preheating. The metal pan is gonna go right on that hot metal baking sheet because the heat's gonna conduct from the baking sheet and cook the bottom crust. That is something I struggled with for so many years. My crust would be beautiful, but I just felt like the bottom crust of gluten-free pie crust never got crispy enough. If you're baking something that's going to drip, like an apple pie or a berry pie, on your metal baking sheet, I recommend putting a piece of parchment paper too, because then it doubles as catching some drips. For a blind bake, that means you're putting it in without a filling. You need something to weigh down the crust so it doesn't puff up while it's baking. The easiest, cheapest option is get a piece of parchment paper, fill it up with dried beans to hold it down. Or there's pie weights that you could get off of Amazon too, which are just essentially reusable dried beans. This I found online. I think it's made by Chicago Metallic. It's your pie weight. So you just put it on the bottom like this. And why I like this is because it has holes in it too. So it cooks the bottom crust. So not only the top gets nice and golden brown, but the bottom allows hot air to circulate in there and get nice and golden as well. So I'll put this in there. I'll put this in the oven for about 10 minutes. And then I want to protect this exposed pie crust from getting overly brown. This silicone pie shield, you just put it on right here. The reason I like this one is because it's nice and wide, so I don't have to adjust it at all for different pie sizes. Your other option, I've had these for years too. These are metal ones, but these you'll have to get in different sizes. This is a larger one. You could get a smaller one too. The other option is tin foil, but I just find tin foil to be such a pain because when you're taking the pie out and checking things, it has a tendency to fall off. This thing also, I think it's like 12 bucks on Amazon. These might be a little bit cheaper, but I do recommend these as well. Okay, our pie is out of the oven. For a blind bake, you wanna bake it at 375, which I mentioned, but for about 25 to 30 minutes. Sometimes I will take out that layer on the bottom for about 5 to 7 minutes just to get the inside nice and golden as well. Look at this pie crust. It is perfection, and this is why I bake it in a metal pan because voila, perfectly golden brown and flaky on the bottom. So of course I have so many pie fillings for you on my website, Mama Gourmand. I have no bake fillings. I have custard pies, pumpkin, apple. They use this pie crust, but then depending on the filling, I will also incorporate some tricks of how best to use it. For high moisture pies, I have some kind of nuanced things that I do versus no bake pies. So you can find all those recipes. I will link to them below as well. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.